Welcome to Soul Fuel, where stories speak to your heart and awaken your inner strength. Today's story is called The Mountain and the Mirror. It's about how failure doesn't break you, it builds you. Because sometimes what you see as the end is only the beginning of your rise. In a quiet valley surrounded by mist and pine trees lived a young man named Rehan. He was known for his dreams so high they scared even him sometimes. Every day he gazed at the giant mountain that stood on the edge of his village, a breathtaking peak the locals called Mount Darya. No one from the valley had ever reached its top. They said the winds there could tear a man apart, and the paths disappeared into clouds. But to Rehan, the mountain wasn't just stone and snow. It was a promise, a symbol of the life he wanted. Stronger, freer, greater. Why waste your life chasing that rock? His neighbors laughed. You'll never make it halfway. But Rehan's heart burned with something they couldn't understand, the hunger to grow beyond what was easy. He spent weeks preparing, building stamina, gathering food, studying maps, sharpening his climbing gear. His father, a humble carpenter, didn't stop him. He simply said, "If you wish to climb the mountain, my son, make sure you're also ready to climb yourself." Those words stayed with Rehan. At dawn, he began his climb. The first few days were full of energy and excitement. The air smelled of pine and frost. Streams whispered alongside the path, and every sunrise made the sky look like fire. He met other travelers too, some enthusiastic, some proud. A few gave up early, saying, "It's too high, too dangerous." Rehan smiled politely and continued alone. He kept whispering to himself, "One step, just one more step." The higher he went, the colder the wind grew. His hands blistered, his breath became heavy, but every time he looked down, he saw how far he'd already come. And that kept him going. By the 10th day, clouds wrapped the mountain in a thick fog. He could barely see 5 steps ahead. His food was running out. His rope was fraying. Then came the night that changed everything. A storm hit. Thunder echoed through the peaks like angry drums. The ground beneath him gave way. And in one terrifying second, Rehan slipped. He fell hard, tumbling onto a lower ledge. His knee twisted painfully, and his pack broke open, scattering what little food he had left. He sat in silence, rain pouring down his face. The mountain that once looked so beautiful now looked cruel and endless. "Maybe they were right," he whispered. "Maybe I was never meant to climb this far." That night, under the cold stars, he thought of home. His father's quiet workshop, the warmth of the village lights, the people who told him to stay where he belonged. For the first time, he wondered if failure was his destiny. But just before sleep took him, something caught his eye. A small piece of broken glass half buried in the dirt beside him. He picked it up. It was part of an old mirror, cracked and weathered by time. When he looked into it, he saw a version of himself he didn't recognize. Tired, yes, but stronger than before. And in that reflection, he noticed something else. The mountain reflected behind him. That moment planted a question in his heart that wouldn't let him rest. If the mountain and I are both reflected here, maybe the climb is not outside me, maybe it's within. He didn't know it yet, but that single thought would become the turning point of his life. The spark that would change his destiny forever. The morning after the storm was quiet, eerily quiet. Rehan woke up shivering, his knees swollen, his hands bleeding. The fog had lifted, revealing how far he had fallen. Above him, the path seemed impossible to reach. Below, the valley looked like a dream fading in mist. He sat still, clutching that small piece of mirror in his hand. Why did I think I could do this? Why did I believe I was meant for more? He looked into the mirror again. The cracks on the surface made his reflection look shattered, just like his spirit. But as he turned it slightly, he noticed something powerful. No matter how cracked the glass was, it still reflected the light. The sun had just risen, and the first golden ray fell directly on the mirror, blinding him for a second. That moment hit him like lightning. Even a broken mirror can shine when light touches it. Maybe, he thought, the climb wasn't about winning against the mountain. It was about finding the light within his cracks. He decided to stay. He couldn't climb yet. His leg hurt too much, but he refused to give up. For the next few days, he built a small shelter with broken branches, melted snow for water, and wrote thoughts in his small leather journal. Day 1 after the fall, my body hurts, but I can still breathe. Day 3, I no longer curse the mountain. Maybe it's here to teach me. Day 5, I understand now. The real climb is happening inside me. As time passed, Rehan began to observe. He saw how snow melted in the morning and froze again at night, adapting constantly. He saw small flowers pushing through the rocks, surviving despite the cold. And he realized something that changed everything. The mountain isn't my enemy, it's my mirror. Every challenge, every storm, every wound was showing him the truth of himself. He remembered his father's words. If you wish to climb the mountain, make sure you're also ready to climb yourself. It made perfect sense now. The outer mountain was just a reflection of the inner climb. Days turned into weeks. His legs slowly healed, his food was gone, but his spirit was stronger than ever. He trained himself again, not out of desperation, but out of discipline. He meditated at dawn, breathed with the wind, listened to silence. In that stillness, he found something he had never known before: peace with his struggle. He smiled at the irony. He had come here to conquer the mountain, but instead, the mountain had conquered his ego. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, he took out the mirror again. The cracks were now covered in fingerprints and dust, but it still reflected his face. Only this time, his face looked different. Not weaker, not defeated, but wiser. The same eyes that once held doubt now held determination. He whispered to his reflection, "You are not the same man who started this climb. You are stronger because you fell." That night, he dreamed vividly. He was standing on the summit of Mount Daria, surrounded by endless clouds. But when he looked down, there was no mountain, only a reflection of himself climbing upward, endlessly. He woke up with tears in his eyes and one realization blazing in his heart. The summit I'm searching for has always been within me. When the morning sun rose again, Rehan packed what little he had left and stood on his feet. The pain in his knee was still there, but he didn't see it as weakness anymore. It was proof that he had survived. He tied the broken mirror to his wrist with a piece of cloth, a reminder of his fall and his lesson. Then, with slow, deliberate steps, he began climbing again. This time, he didn't rush. He didn't compete. He climbed with awareness. He breathed with the rhythm of the mountain, and every time he looked into that mirror, he saw a man who refused to quit. The morning was calm when Rehan began his climb again. The storm had passed, and the sky was clear, painted in golden hues that seemed to bless his every step. His movements were slow, but sure. Each rock he gripped, each gust of wind that hit his face, reminded him of everything he'd survived. He no longer climbed to prove anything to the world. He climbed to honor the person he had become. The higher he went, the thinner the air grew. His breaths came heavy, but he didn't complain. He had learned that silence itself could be a prayer. At one narrow ridge where the drop below looked endless, he stopped. He looked down at the valley. Small, distant, almost unreal. A soft smile appeared on his face. "That's where I began," he whispered, "believing the mountain was my enemy." He touched the small piece of mirror tied to his wrist. Sunlight danced across its cracks. But the mountain was never against me. It was raising me. The mirror's message. By afternoon, clouds surrounded him again, wrapping him in soft mist. For a moment, he couldn't see the path ahead, only white everywhere. But this time, he wasn't afraid. He closed his eyes and trusted his instincts, one careful step after another. Then, something remarkable happened. Through the fog, he saw a faint light glimmering on the rock face, a mirror-like patch of ice reflecting his image. He leaned closer and saw his reflection clearly for the first time since he began his journey. And in that reflection, he saw every version of himself: the hopeful boy, the proud climber, the broken man, and the wiser soul who stood now. Each version looked back at him, smiling. In that silent conversation between the man and his reflection, he finally understood. The mountain didn't test my strength. It tested my belief. He realized that true success isn't at standing on top, It's being able to look in the mirror and recognize the person staring back. The summit within hours later. As dusk approached, Rehan finally reached the summit. The peak of Mount Darya wasn't what he had imagined. There were no crowds, no cheers, no golden reward, just silence. The pure, unbroken silence of the sky touching the earth. He looked around and laughed softly, not out of pride, but gratitude. Every wound, every scar, every failure had brought him here. He sat on a rock, pulled out his journal, and wrote his final note. I came here searching for greatness. I found it in the quiet voice that refused to give up. I thought I was climbing a mountain, but I was really climbing myself. He took off the cracked mirror from his wrist and placed it on the highest stone. The sunlight hit it perfectly, scattering golden reflections across the snow, like fragments of every lesson he had learned shining back at him. As he stood there, looking at the endless horizon, he whispered to the wind, "You taught me everything, how to fall, how to rise, and how to see." Every person has their own mountain to climb. It could be fear, self-doubt, failure, or pain. But if you keep climbing step by step, you'll discover that the summit was never somewhere outside. It was always within you. Because success isn't about reaching the top, it's about becoming someone who never stops rising. Soulfule outro. Calm piano melody fades in. Narrator. This was Soulfule, where stories don't just inspire, they transform. If the mountain in the mirror touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that failure isn't falling, it is refusing to rise again. Remember, the real view begins when you face your reflection with courage. Keep growing, keep believing, keep climbing. Soulfule, stories that speak to your soul.